Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are diving deep into a story of truly astonishing scale. India's energy transformation.
hmm
This isn't just about, a nation shifting gears. It's about a profound change that could reshape global energy dynamics for decades.
That's exactly right. Our mission today is to really unpack the fascinating trends and, honestly, the colossal opportunities emerging from India's rapid economic growth and its ambitious climate targets.
Right.
We're specifically looking at the next, say, 15 years,
Yeah.
from 2025 out to 2040.
And to give you that shortcut to being incredibly well-informed,
Yeah.
we've pulled from quite a stack of sources: financial reports, market data, government policy docs, company filings.
A real mix.
Yeah, everything. We've distilled it all so you don't have to sift through it.
And the core question we're tackling is kind of twofold. First, what forces are driving India's projected doubling of electricity demand, which is expected by the early 2030s?
Doubling, wow.
Yeah. And maybe even more critically, how is the country aiming to meet half its energy requirements from renewables by that same year, scaling up to a staggering 500 gigawatts of non-fossil capacity?
500 gigawatts, that's huge.
It's a really ambitious journey, and we're here to guide you through the why and the how.
Okay, let's unpack this then. The foundation, as you said, is India's unprecedented energy appetite. The numbers, well, they really do paint a picture of immense scale.
They really do. India's electricity demand is expected to rise fastest among all major economies. We're talking about it potentially doubling by the early 2030s.
Right.
That's growing at roughly a 6% compound annual growth rate through 2030, which actually is even higher than the past decade's average of about 5%.
So accelerating demand. And alongside that, these incredibly ambitious government commitments. 500 gigawatts of non-fossil capacity by 2030. That's up from what, around 235 gigawatts in 2025?
Exactly, a huge leap. Plus, they want half their energy requirements met by renewables.
And it's all leading towards that net zero goal by 2070. So what does it tell us then that nearly 50% of India's installed power capacity is already non-fossil today? That seems like, well, a powerful starting point.
It's definitely a significant head start, It signals a foundational shift that's actually been underway for some time now.
Yep.
It makes those ambitious 2030 targets seem, well, maybe more achievable. And what's fascinating here is that it's not just a top-down policy push. There are 5 major megatrends on the ground really fueling this whole transformation.
Ah, okay. So this energy transformation isn't just driven by government mandates. What's sparking this monumental shift from the ground up?
Precisely. The first megatrend is the explosion of data centers. It's driven by India's emergence as a major digital economy.
Makes sense.
And this means a corresponding surge in really power-hungry data centers. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Globally, AI adoption alone is projected to quadruple data center electricity demand by 2030.
Wow, quadrupling globally. That's massive. How does it translate specifically for India?
Well, locally, Indian data centers, which currently use only about maybe 0.5% of national electricity.
Tiny?
Right, tiny now. But that could swell to 3% by 2030. And we're already seeing examples like Reliance building AI data centers powered entirely by their own solar and wind energy.
Really? So they're generating it themselves for the data centers?
Exactly. It highlights this growing market for renewable power purchase agreements, PPAs, with these big tech firms. It's a huge shift in how they source power.
That's fascinating about Reliance. Is this just them? Or are other major tech players in India doing similar things? What does this signal, maybe beyond just cost savings?
It's definitely a trend we're seeing other major players adopt, yeah. Both for, like you said, cost stability, but also for meeting their own ESG targets, their environmental and social goals.
Right, ESG.
It signals a move towards greater energy independence and sustainability for big tech. Now, if data centers are powering up India's digital future, the second megatrend is maybe an even more foundational shift happening in households. Massive electrification.
Ah, the Subhagya scheme? Is that it?
Yeah.
Connecting, what was it, over 28 million new households since 2018, achieving near universal electrification.
Correct. And the real impact here is clear in the per capita electricity consumption figures. It jumped roughly 46% in just the past decade.
46%.
Yeah, from about 957 kilowatt hours back in 2013-14 up to nearly 1,400 kilowatt hours in 2023-24. But here's the kicker.
Okay.
India's per capita usage is still barely half the world average.
Half. Still.
Still just half. This indicates immense latent demand. That's the demand that's going to emerge as incomes rise, as people buy more appliances, especially out in rural areas.
That really puts the sheer scale of future growth into perspective, doesn't it? I mean, just imagine the impact for millions starting under reliable light running a simple fan. It's a fundamental shift in daily life.
Absolutely fundamental. Moving on, the third trend is just the massive infrastructure development happening across the country. We're talking electrified railways, new metro systems popping up everywhere, highways, airports, even smart cities, all demanding substantial power.
And Indian Railways is a great example here, right? They're targeting net zero emissions.
They are.
Projected to reach 10,000 megawatts of traction power by 2030. And what's more, they're already getting some of India's cheapest solar power, like 2.15 per kilowatt hour.
Yeah, incredibly cheap solar. It just shows a major bulk consumer pivoting really aggressively to green energy.
So it's viable then, economically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It demonstrates that clean energy isn't just about environmental goals, it's about economic viability too, even for these huge operations. Okay, next up, the fourth megatrend, manufacturing expansion, driven by the Make in India initiative.
Ah, Make in India.
Manufacturing has actually been the main driver of India's energy demand growth since way back in 2000. It now forms about 36% of final energy consumption.
That's a huge chunk already. How much more growth are we expecting there?
Well, the projections are that India is expected to account for 1/3 of global industrial energy demand growth by 2040.
1/3. Globally?
Yes. And the production-linked incentive scheme, the PLI scheme, is crucial here.
Okay.
It's catalyzing new manufacturing in electronics, solar equipment, batteries, electric vehicles, you name it. Just as one example, the PLI for high-efficiency solar modules, it actually doubled India's solar module production capacity.
Doubled.
From 38 gigawatts to 74 gigawatts in just
Whoa.
1 year.
In 1 year. Okay. And that leads us directly, I guess, to the fifth megatrend, which is the PLI scheme's supply-side revolution itself. It's not just boosting manufacturing generally, but specifically the domestic production of clean energy tech.
Exactly. This is truly a game changer. We've seen an astonishing 38-fold expansion in solar PV module manufacturing capacity.
38 times.
Yeah, from just 2.3 gigawatts in 2014 to potentially 88 gigawatts by 2025.
Incredible.
And this local capacity building, it's rapidly accelerating India's energy transition. It reduces import dependence, mainly on China for solar modules. It strengthens the domestic developers, and it signals really strong government commitment. It creates this powerful feedback loop.
Okay, so those are the 5 big internal drivers. But beyond these powerful megatrends, India's energy story is also shaped by broader global currents, right?
Yeah.
Like climate policy and geopolitical shifts.
Absolutely. Climate policy and decarbonization are central. India's Panchamrit pledge from COP26 that includes the 500 GW non-fossil target by 2030 and the 2070 net zero goal is driving really aggressive renewable energy deployment.
Right.
And it's also pushing a gradual phasing down of coal.
And are we seeing India's major energy players, the big companies, actually pivot towards these goals? Or is it still mostly just a top-down mandate they're following?
Oh, no, we're seeing a significant pivot from the top players. For example, NTPC, which is India's biggest power company and traditionally heavily coal-based, they've committed to 60 gigawatts of renewable capacity by 2032. Tata Power is even more aggressive. They're targeting 70% green capacity by 2030 and net zero by 2045.
70% green by 2030 for Tata Power.
Yeah. This greening of their portfolios, it's essential for their long-term viability and, frankly, for investor appeal.
That's a huge shift for these traditional giants.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, India isn't doing this in a vacuum. International partnerships, investments,
Yeah.
they must be playing a big role.
A huge role. India has really taken a leading position in global renewable energy cooperation. They co-founded the International Solar Alliance, the ISA,
Right, the ISA.
which aims to mobilize $1 trillion for solar by 2030. $1 trillion. And then you have initiatives like the U.S.-India Strategic Clean Energy Partnership bringing crucial technical know-how and funding.
And green hydrogen. You mentioned that potential.
Ah, yes. What's particularly ambitious is India's goal to be a global green hydrogen hub. They're targeting at least 5 million metric tons of annual production by 2030.
5 million tons.
And with significant potential for export, too.
That ambition for green hydrogen is certainly bold.
Yeah.
What are the main hurdles there? I mean, cost competitiveness, the infrastructure needed.
Yeah. Cost is definitely the primary hurdle for green hydrogen right now, given how energy intensive it is to produce.
Sure.
And the infrastructure for transport, for storage, that all needs to be built out pretty much from scratch. However, the consistent policy support and just the global drive towards decarbonization,
Hmm.
they're creating strong tailwinds, pushing innovation and scale to overcome these challenges.
Okay.
And finally, these shifts tie into global energy trade dynamics.
Right, because India is currently, the world's third largest oil importer.
Hmm.
Over 80% of its crude is imported. That must create vulnerability.
Huge vulnerability.
Hmm.
And it provides a major strategic reason to push for domestic renewables. Reducing that import dependence is critical.
Makes sense.
But connecting this to the bigger picture, we're seeing this emerging global trade in new commodities like green hydrogen and green ammonia. India is actively exploring exporting green ammonia. They've even booked some export orders already.
Really? Export orders for green ammonia?
Yeah. So the long-term value for investors, it clearly lies in companies adapting to these clean energy trends, aligning with global decarbonization goals, not really in those doubling down on fossil fuels.
So, pulling it all together, what does this mean for the investment context? It sounds like the convergence of all these trends creates a really robust long-term growth story for India's energy sector, with renewables, especially solar, right at the heart of it.
It really does. You see traditional power utilities evolving into these hybrid models, adding more and more green capacity. A recent report we looked at actually concluded that this creates a sort of medium risk opportunity.
Okay.
Focusing on a portfolio of large and mid-cap Indian energy stocks may be suited for systematic monthly investments, somewhere in the 3,000 to 10,000 range per month. It's just one example of how someone might approach this significant opportunity.
Right, an example approach. So let's take a closer look at some of the specific companies at the forefront. Maybe start with NTPC Ltd, India's largest power producer.
Sure. NTPC is what you'd call a hybrid utility. It's undergoing this steady growth with green pivot, targeting, as I said, 60 GW of renewable capacity by 2032.
Okay.
It's shown pretty stable stock performance, about 135% return over the last 3 years, and it has a moderate valuation, so maybe seen as a solid foundational kind of choice.
Okay, foundational. Then there's Tata Power Co., an integrated power utility.
Right, Tata Power. They have a really aggressive RE expansion plan, aiming for 70% green capacity by 2030, 100% carbon neutral by 2045.
Very ambitious.
Very. And the stock has been a multi-bagger, delivered about 327% return in 3 years, basically more than tripled investors' money.
Wow.
So it's high price-to-earnings ratio, the PE, that reflects those big growth bets people are making on it.
Got it. And the renewable pure play, Adani Green Energy.
Adani Green, yeah. India's largest renewables developer currently. They're on a high growth trajectory, targeting 50 gigawatt of renewable capacity by 2030.
50 gigawatts.
Its stock performance has been, volatile, but strong long term, and it carries a premium valuation reflecting that future potential, but maybe with higher associated risks.
Okay. We also have Power Grid Corp., the dominant power transmission utility. The pipes, essentially.
Exactly. The grid. Power Grid is expanding steadily to integrate all these hundreds of gigawatts of new renewables. They've got over $2 trillion, that's about $24 billion, in planned investment.
Huge investment.
It's a consistent performer, moderate valuation, offers a sort of lower risk, almost annuity-like growth profile, crucial for actually connecting all that new generation.
Makes sense. You need the grid. What about JSW Energy, a private power producer that's transitioning fast?
Yeah, JSW Energy has really ambitious targets. They're looking to reach 30 GW capacity by 2030, up from 20 GW now, with an 84% renewable mix by then.
84% renewable.
Right. Its valuation is elevated, reflecting that future growth and that aggressive transition story.
Okay. And finally, NHPC Ltd., a hydropower and renewables firm.
Right, NHPC. They provide critical dispatchable energy, that's power you can turn on and off quickly, which is really important for balancing the grid as you add more intermittent renewables like solar and wind.
Grid stability.
Exactly. They have about 27 GW of projects in their pipeline, mostly hydro, but also some solar. It's generally considered a low-beta, dividend-paying stock.
Meaning less volatile.
Less volatile than the overall market, yeah.
Yeah.
And it has a reasonable valuation, partly due to its long life, sort of perpetual hydro assets.
So looking at that range of companies, the rationale for a balanced approach seems pretty clear, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Mixing some of the stable, income-generating public sector utilities like NTPC, Power Grid, NHPC, with some of the higher growth, renewable-focused private players like Tata Power, Adani Green, JSW Energy.
Right.
It offers really good diversification across the whole energy value chain. And it helps balance the risk profile. It really encapsulates the whole transformation story, from generation to transmission to different risk levels.
Okay. So to recap this whole deep dive, India's energy sector is undergoing this massive multi-decade transformation. It's driven by really robust domestic demand, ambitious industrial growth plans, and very strong climate commitments.
And the big takeaway, I think, is that meeting this escalating demand while achieving these significant climate goals, it just requires trillions of rupees of investment. Trillions.
In generation capacity and grid infrastructure and energy storage, it's a colossal undertaking, but one that's already well underway.
And as we close out today, here's maybe a provocative thought for you to ponder. India's energy transition. It's not just an internal story of growth and sustainability. It's really a dynamic force that could profoundly influence global energy security and, perhaps surprisingly, technology innovation worldwide.
Interesting point.
Yeah, so what unexpected innovations or maybe international collaborations might emerge as India continues down this path to becoming a cleaner, more electrified economy? Something to think about. We'll definitely be watching.